I really think that journos are the worst people in America. I mean, as a profession. I mean, there are worse individual human beings. Yes, mass murderers, child molesters are worse than your average journalist. But as a profession, I think journalists are the worst people in America right now for a job that's technically legal. They do the most damage. They're the least useful. Here's an example. You're like, Buck, why would you think that? John Harwood, who's this guy work for? Oh, CNN. Of course. The pandemic is now every week taking twice as many American lives as were lost on 9/11. Okay. Well, what is he trying to tell us? Yeah, there are people dying from this disease that's out there, this pandemic. That's real. What does the comparison with 9/11 tell us? Every year, more people die from, lung cancer than have died in, the 9/11 times 10. Well, what does that tell us? Nothing. It's irrelevant, but it's all meant to see. It's meant to conflate in people's minds 9/11, asleep at the wheel, hit with a mass casualty attack, gross negligence, Bush administration. Remember, Bush ended up getting reelected after that. Bush administration and Trump hit by the pandemic, didn't do enough. What was he supposed to do? What was he supposed to do? They never have an answer for this. Oh, he lied. He lied. It's all we ever hear. He listened to Fauci. The Fauci said jump. He said how high. The Fauci said I want this. He gave him this. What was he supposed to do? He allowed the states to set their actual reopen timelines. Gave them all of the equipment that they could have. We are on track for the fastest ever vaccine ever under these kinds of circumstances because of Operation Warp Speed. What's the president going to do? He's not responsible for COVID-19. Okay, this is a once in a century. Well, some people would say actually the flu of 1968 to 1970 was similar to this, but this is a very rare event. And to put it at the president's feet without giving any specifics, are there things? Why do I criticize Cuomo, the governor of New York, so much? But I say, well, you can't put it on Trump's feet because Cuomo not only has locked the city down much longer than he said he would based on the numbers they put forward. They said, you get to this and we'll let you have your lives back. And we got to that level of low infection. We got to that control of the disease. They said, yeah, no, still not giving you your lives back. Still going to tell you what you can do because we say so. But that's not even the worst thing. As we know, the worst thing that Cuomo did was making a decision because he was so panicked and so, hyperventilating, if you will, about the lack of hospital beds that anyone with COVID who is a senior from a nursing home in a hospital, if they could be discharged, even if they had the disease still, got sent back into nursing homes. That is a decision that is cause and effect. You send COVID positive people back into nursing homes. People in the nursing home, because they're the highest risk for death from this, are going to die. That is what happened. That's a very clear cause and effect. I'm not sitting here throwing out some allegation. We can't really know. And who knows? No. And that's why Cuomo's now doing everything he can to block an actual investigation into this. Someone on the left, if they're going to continue to say that Trump is responsible for 200,000 people dying, someone on the left needs to tell me, what was he supposed to do? What was going to be the different thing that he was going to do? And I never hear this. He said it was going to go away. We've already talked about it. He was trying to keep people calm. If we're going to be so literal, it is going to go away. He didn't say when. But he was trying to keep people calm. What was he? He listened. They kept saying he doesn't listen to the experts. Birx and Fauci. Birx and Fauci have been essentially the most powerful policy officials in the United States for the last 7 months. And I think that's bad. I don't think we should have ceded all of that to those two. But that's what happened. That's what happened. Birx and Fauci running the United States. Pretty much. And now what do they say? Well, now they claim that the president himself is responsible for all of these deaths. The president himself is the reason that people have been dying from this. Oh, and the other Cuomo, Bro Cuomo, the weightlifter, over at CNN is now goading Trump's base over this because he lies and we don't even care. We're too dumb to know, or whatever it is. I mean, CNN's full of morons. Play 9.
He wants people weak. Yeah. He wants them weak and scared. And what hurts most in this tape and him telling his own people not to wear masks when he knew he was exposing them to danger is that he's humiliated his own base. These people who are right to feel disaffected and frustrated and so angry at the political process and the institutions that they went with someone as much of a renegade at best as Trump early on, and he's humiliated them with how he uses the office. That's rough. Second, he's still doing it. He did Michigan tonight. He told them they're rounding the corner or rounding the turn or whatever he mangled. The curve is going like this with cases in Michigan. And he had another crowd where they weren't wearing masks and masks were optional. And he didn't tell them about masks either. He's still doing it.
Just blather. Notice Cuomo here. He's so used to talking and idiot libs thinking, oh, he sounds like Cuomo sounds like what a stupid person thinks a smart person sounds like. Oh, he's talking. There are words coming out. He starts out, Trump wants people scared. That was the beginning of that soundbite. Trump wants people scared. And then he gives us this whole explanation of how the base is humiliated. No, we're not. I know Trump supporters. He does not. Not humiliated. Not at all. Not even a little bit. And then goes on to say that he's telling them, don't worry, we're bending. So does he want them scared or is he telling them, don't worry? Doesn't matter. Just, I hate Trump. Orange man bad. That's it. That's actually what the analysis is, with a lot of words thrown in there to make it sound like there's a thought process behind any of this. It's the equivalent. The liberal critique of Trump is like watching a baby in a high chair throw its toys on the ground, spit up its peas, and start crying all the time. That's the intellectual depth you get from them about the president and why he's so bad. There are real things they could criticize Trump on. And I know some of you don't even like me to mention it. It's almost like I'm giving away the secret. We have not seen a wall finish. We've gotten some of the wall, fine. We have not seen a healthcare reform get passed that is free market or more free market based as we were promised, right? We have not ended the war in Afghanistan and Iraq. I know he's trying. But these are, look, reality is reality. These are things that have not happened that were promised. And you know, you can say, well, he's trying, he's going to get there. But those are legitimate grounds of at least critique and debate. But it's never that. It's Trump's a traitor. Trump killed 200,000 people. These people are out of their minds. You know, I wasn't running around pretending that Obama was hiding under people's beds and, you know, stealing their children in the middle of the night as like he's some kind of monster out of a movie or something. Look at what they do with Trump. It's insane. Now, a lot of you might think, hold on, maybe it's useful to our side that their criticisms are so just maniacal. But what you're also seeing now with BLM and Antifa and the way the left has taken to the streets is that they believe this stuff, though. This isn't just rhetoric for them. They actually think that he's a fascist. They think that they're fighting against the dissolution of America. And then when you ask, what has Trump done that is fascistic? Where is the fascistic impulse of Donald Trump? In fact, most of the fights that he's had with the left have been over letting people have more choice, more freedom, and more legal protection as individuals. You know, constitutional rights, Second Amendment rights. Look at where is the... They talk about the kids in cages, which was a complete misrepresentation. That was a scam, by the way. I know this issue very well, traveled the border multiple times, the whole kids in cages thing with Trump. There were people who were showing up, the overwhelming majority of them not intending to actually go through the asylum process, fully, but they were using the loophole of claiming a fake asylum after illegally crossing, not legally, illegally crossing the border to overwhelm the system to be released in the United States interior. It was an illegal immigration scam. And because we hadn't been set up for this before, there were some logistical and facility shortcomings because it's supposed to be for individual males who are crossing the border, not women with their 3 kids who are skipping the immigration line, which is what was happening. Full stop. And the media was lying to you about this. Oh, they're fleeing MS-13 violence. I guess you could say anybody in Honduras is fleeing MS-13 violence. A lot of it there, right? But that doesn't qualify you for, because you come from a country that's in a crappy situation doesn't necessarily mean you actually get asylum. What was the fascistic, going back to this, what's the fascistic thing that Trump has done? They don't have an answer. But if you bring that up, they say horrible things to you. And what are we all supposed to take from this? You know what sounds a bit fascistic to me? Politicians mandating that you are physically uncomfortable and that you can be the target of ridicule, of assault, even of action by the state, arrest perhaps, just give it time, for not walking around with a piece of cloth over your mouth. Biden thinks that that's funny. Play 12.
I have relatives all over the country and all over the political spectrum. How do you make the argument to a relative I have in Texas who says, yeah, this virus is horrible, but it's not Trump's fault, it's China's fault?
Let's assume we'll take both that relative's points. It's China's fault. If it's China's fault, why did Trump praise China? Why did he say how transparent Xi Jinping and the Chinese are going to be? Why did he insist that the 44 people we had there, and while I and others are insisting that they go in and have access to see really what is happening, to know the detail? Why did he not insist on that? And the virus is not his fault, but the deaths are his fault because he could have done something about it, Jake. I'd say to your uncle, he could have done something about it, but he said nothing. He didn't talk. He said, there's no need for social distancing. Don't bother wearing masks. He actually went so far as to suggest that it was a violation of American freedom to maintain you had to wear a mask. And look what's happened.
He didn't do things. What was the thing he was supposed to do? Doesn't matter. Orange man bad. That's all you're supposed to take away from this. Wearing masks, not a violation of freedom. No, it is actually. If you want to wear a mask, go ahead. That's your call. It's basically a piece of clothing, a piece of cloth you put over your mouth. Go for it. I'm not saying, if that makes you feel better. The government mandating this now? What else can the government mandate? Slopes are in fact slippery, friends. Where do you think this stops? You think the next time you have a Democrat president with a Democrat majority House and Senate, that they're going to play by the rules and obey constitutional restraint? Or are they going to ram whatever they want through, like, I don't know, climate change stuff, and it's a health emergency. It's a gun violence emergency. Got to take in all those guns, all those assault rifles, hand them in, and you go to prison. What, do you think they won't do that? It's just a question of can they? It's not that they don't want to. They tell us they want to. What does COVID-19 have to do with you losing your house? Well, it's pretty straightforward. The FBI says that 75% increase in cybercrime is our reality right now during the COVID-19 pandemic. And you know what that means? Your stuff is online. People can find your home's title, your information, and then the bad guys can use a quitclaim deed to push you off and put themselves on. Then they take out loans. They basically steal the equity in your home and leave you with the payments. Might even see a foreclosure notice before you even know what's happened. The usual identity theft services don't protect you. You have to take action today with Home Title Lock. Go to HomeTitleLock.com and use the promo code BUCK to get yourself 30 free days of protection. You can also check to see if you're a victim of this crime and don't even know it. That's HomeTitleLock.com, promo code BUCK for 30 free days of protection. Plus, you can check to see if you're a victim and don't know it yet. HomeTitleLock.com, promo code BUCK. Meant to mention this before, but today it broke that Bahrain is another country that's going to normalize ties with Israel. The Bahrain Crown Prince is going to be in D.C. on Monday, according to White House officials. Another peace deal. Well, where were all those Obama administration peace deals? Oh, that's right. There was the, let's give Iran a lot of money. It's their money, they say. Let's give Iran a lot of money and send them pallets of cash to pay for hostages they've taken. That's what they did. I'll never forget. I was on CNN with gurgling, Nixon and Ford, Reagan administration was coming along, planes and what? This is the best political analyst over at CNN. I remember back in Watergate and Ford and Nixon, Reagan, and Carter, and I was like, guys, we sent them a giant cash payment, and they sent us people that were Americans that they were holding illegally as hostages. That is paying for hostage. That is what we did. We paid off the Iranians to release hostages. We negotiated with terrorists. That is what we did. But they're CNN. They're like, no, the hostages was a separate thing, and the cash just happened to, like ships passing in the night and like a tire with like a baby and like a thing. CNN just blather. Just blather. Didn't make any sense. You're like, what? But another peace deal for President Trump. Another peace deal here that, but he's not worthy of a Nobel Peace Prize. Obama was so cool, so hip, doing great stuff, right? That's what we were told. And Trump, their hatred for him, the criticisms of him aren't even interesting because they're so deranged. The criticisms of him aren't even worth hearing because it's never illuminating. You're just like, this is the same stuff over and over again. They simply don't care. And then you also have and the economic fallout. This is another thing they're going to blame on the president. Here's Joe Biden, play 23.
Well, experts say that if he had acted just 1 week sooner, 36,000 people would have been saved. If he acted 2 weeks sooner, back in March, 54,000 lives would have been spared in March and April alone. His failure has not only cost lives, it sent our economy in a tailspin. It cost millions more in American livelihoods. This is a recession created by Donald Trump's negligence, and he is unfit for this job as a consequence of it.
I mean, that's just an intellectually indefensible, dumbass thing to say. Trump created the recession? Really? That's what we're going to go with now? Yeah, that's what they're going to go with. Biden is speaking to people like he assumes they're all idiots. Or they're programmed to just nod and clap for whatever he says. That's it. Biden speaking to human beings across the country like they have no ability to sift through fact from fiction. And that's really a very important characteristic for his voter base. This is all about belief, and it's all about what they are told to do and told to think. This is not, my friends, about a sober, rational judgment on the Trump presidency. Not for Democrats. If it were, they'd be saying very different stuff. Let's talk school reopening, homeschooling, and whether Americans are finally seeing that maybe the public school system not as entirely essential as we had all been led to believe for a very long time. To walk us through all this stuff, we got our friend Inez Felcher with us now. She's a senior policy analyst at the Independent Women's Forum. Inez, good to have you back.
It's always great to be here with you, Buck.
So how are the school reopenings going? What are we seeing? What's happening?
Well, we're seeing a lot of chaos. In a lot of districts, the plans weren't released until a week or two ago, in some cases purposely so that it would be difficult for families to make alternative arrangements if they weren't happy with either the remote or hybrid plan that schools were introducing. So there's been a lot of chaos. Some places are open, some places are going hybrid, which means there's rotating schedules once or twice a week, in person, and the rest remote. And further, the one more portion of our nation's schools are still going fully remote, just like they did in the spring.
So how has it been in comparison to what the expectations were for all these plans?
Yeah, well, I think parents are very frustrated right now because, this pandemic took us all by surprise. We're not talking anymore about the months of March and April. A lot of families limped through very dissatisfying and ineffective distance learning through the spring. But what they're seeing is this year that things are not that different, that schools are not really much more prepared than they were in the spring to deliver distance learning effectively. So a lot of families are looking for alternative arrangements, whether that's choosing to formally homeschool their kids or to join what's being called pandemic pods, right? To join up with a few other families who have school-age children, and then to share an in-person tutor or have the parents take on rotating duties in terms of teaching the children. So we're seeing a lot of innovation, a lot of parent-driven innovation. We're not seeing the school system recognize how badly spring distance learning has failed for most families and then rush to make that up. And instead, we're seeing teachers unions and school administrations try to close off alternative avenues for parents out of fear that they're going to lose funding.
How is the homeschooling surge coming along? Do we have some sense of how many new people are homeschooling, and what's I guess there can't really be a consensus, but what are some of from the front lines of the homeschooling battles, what are we hearing?
Yeah, so we just had a poll come out the other day that showed that 1 in 10 American families is now homeschooling. And the language was very careful. This is not just folks who are adding at home and have their kids somehow otherwise enrolled in a school. These are folks that are formally homeschooling where their children are receiving education primarily from home. That's more than double what the normal numbers are. So we've seen formal homeschooling numbers double, and potentially even higher than that, because again, this is families. So you've got a lot of families with multiple kids, all of whom are now being schooled at home. So the percentage of kids might even be up more than that 10%. And then you have all the families that are experimenting with different kinds of alternatives in addition to virtual learning. And parents who weren't dissatisfied with the virtual learning, they're still having their kids, go to school and be counted on the attendance rosters, but they're either doing pods or they're teaching their kids more at home. So I suspect actually the impact is much bigger. But what we have seen is a drastic drawdown in enrollment numbers from 83%. This is not including charter schools. Actually, charter schools, interestingly, those numbers have held steady, meaning that parents are relatively satisfied with what they're getting from charter schools as opposed to traditional public schools. But in the traditional publics, we've gone down from 83% of American students being enrolled in traditional public schools to 76. I mean, that's an earthquake, and it remains to be seen whether this will be a one-year thing in response to the coronavirus. I suspect it will have a long-term cultural impact, and hopefully will change the education system for the better.
How are the teachers' unions fighting back against this? I've seen some stories here and there about efforts to make homeschooling either more difficult or just not allowed. What's going on with that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely been pushback from districts, again, trying to close off those alternative options for parents who are not satisfied with what they're getting from the public schools. Instead of trying to improve what they're delivering to parents, public schools oftentimes, and especially teachers unions, have gone out of their way to try to foreclose other options. So for example, in states like Oregon and Pennsylvania, the unions have been pushing the state legislatures to cap enrollment in virtual charter schools that already existed. These are charter schools that are used to delivering content online, and they've been doing so for many years prior to the pandemic. And it just makes sense to learn from them and to let them increase in enrollment. But teachers unions have tried to close off those options. They've also sent, there was one principal in a San Diego district that sent out a message to parents basically warning them that if they didn't jump through all the correct hoops in terms of registering their students as homeschoolers, then what they would be doing is illegal. I highly recommend Homeschool Legal Defense Association if you're considering homeschooling. Their membership, I think, is like $11 a year, and they have all of the legal information so you can make sure to cross your T's and dot your I's. But this was obviously an attempt from a San Diego principal to try to discourage families from homeschooling, and it ended with an appeal. Please don't leave our school. Our staff salaries depend on you enrolling, which, of course, the purpose of the $700 billion we spend every year in education is supposed to be for educating children. It's not just supposed to be staff salaries for adults in empty buildings. Oh, actually, and let me just add one more thing. What we're seeing is the rise of these NDAs, the non-disclosure agreements for families that are receiving virtual learning. They're getting legal documents from the schools saying that parents are either not allowed to sit in on those classes and to watch the content their kids are learning, or if they do, they're not allowed to share that content, because we're seeing that pop up on Twitter and, Tucker Carlson. We're seeing some of these examples of what kids are actually learning in schools for the first time. This is the first time for a lot of parents. They're actually seeing this material and they are not pleased, and schools are trying to get around that backlash by forcing families to sign non-disclosure agreements.
Inez, before we let you go, and it's Inez Felcher from the Independent Women's Forum, where she's a senior policy analyst. For people listening to this who are either maybe just starting or thinking about homeschooling their kids, but they might have this thought of, am I doing it right? Can I? And basically, I mean, look, I would think, am I in a position, if I had kids, which I don't, but am I in a position to homeschool my kids? Do I know how to do this? Where can those parents go?
Like I said, HSLDA is a great resource, but also my organization, IWF, we've done a number of blog posts from homeschooling families who are homeschooling before the pandemic with tips and tricks. And there's been a lot of that, especially the Daily Signal over at Heritage Foundation has had some great events. Heritage Foundation itself has put together events from families that are doing potting or homeschooling before, basically giving those sort of advice and tricks and recommending curriculum and materials. There's a lot of this stuff out there online. It can feel overwhelming, but I think the number one thing to keep in mind is that you're not replicating school at home. It actually is a much more relaxed, many families find it to be a much more relaxed environment. They find they can get through the kind of academic material in a much smaller number of hours than sending your kids off to school for 7 or 8 hours and then having them come back to home to do 2 or 3 more hours of homework. And a lot of families are finding, actually, especially in comparison to the chaos that's happening across the public schools today, that actually homeschooling is a more relaxing option, and I feel like perhaps a weight has been lifted off of their backs rather than frantically trying to keep up with whatever the schedule of the week is with virtual learning.
Have you ever heard Michael Malice say that? He says this often, public schools are prisons for children. Have you ever heard that? I'm just wondering if you
I haven't. It didn't originate with him. Yeah.
Really?
But
I've never heard anyone else say that. Where did that originate?
I don't know, but I've been hearing it for like well over a decade. So it's from various online personalities. I don't think public schools are prisons. I actually think, originally the public school system, I'm of two minds as to the history of the public school system, the common schools in the United States. On the one hand, they did centralize education in a way I think was negative for the country, but they also did create some kind of community bonds between folks. And actually, this is one of the last community, sort of centers that a lot of American towns have. People gather for football games on Friday. They do provide a lot of this community glue, and I don't want to downplay the importance of that. Unfortunately, it can't come at the expense of education. All the socialization aspects and the community aspects, those are all wonderful and important. But first and foremost, education has to be about education. And both in terms of just academics and not delivering, academic results year after year, the public schools have failed. And then I think even more importantly, they've really failed to equip now 2 generations, mine and yours, I assume, the millennials. You might be an exennial.
Whoa, hey, hold on. I'm an old millennial, yeah.
But our generation and then the generation that's coming after us, they've totally failed to equip us as a generation with the knowledge of being a good American citizen, to understand our founding, to understand our Constitution, our way of life here in America. And instead, they've largely inculcated false beliefs about America being systemically racist. And we're seeing the results of teaching, broadly teaching these myths, these dangerous myths today, I think, in the riots and the unrest. So I don't think the public schools have done a bang-up job, even though they do. I wouldn't call them prisons. I do think they provide some community aspects that are important, but those community aspects cannot outweigh the importance of education and citizenship.
Inez Felcher, everybody. Inez, thanks so much for joining. Always good to see you.
It's always great to see you, Buck.
You know how you become famous as a journo? Accuse Trump of something bad. And if you just want to score a whole bunch of points and get social media followers, say that he's a liar. Say in the West Wing of the White House that the President of the United States is a liar. Play clip 18.
Why did you lie to the American people, and why should we trust what you have to say now?
That's a terrible question, and the phraseology, I didn't lie. What I said is we have to be calm, we can't be panicked. I knew that the tapes these were a series of phone calls that we had, mostly phone calls. And Bob Woodward is somebody that I respect just from hearing the name for many, many years, not knowing too much about his work, not caring about his work. But I thought it would be interesting to talk to him for a period of, calls. So we did that. I don't know if it's good or bad. I don't even know if the book is good or bad. But certainly if he thought that was a bad statement, he would have reported it because he thinks that, you don't want to have anybody that is going to suffer medically because of some fact. And he didn't report it because he didn't think it was bad. Nobody thought it was bad. Wait a minute. And your question, the way you phrase that is such a disgrace. It's a disgrace to ABC television network. It's a disgrace to your employer.
Yep, it is. I pointed out that Obama lied to the entire American people. I mean, really lied. If you like your health care plan, you can keep it. He lied to get something passed through the Congress that he wouldn't have been able to otherwise. He knew it was a lie when he said it. He repeated it tons of times. It affected a lot of people. Cause and effect. Do you think that Jonathan Karl ever said, "Why did you lie?" Oh, I'm sure fake Tapper was like, "Sir, did you feel like you perhaps misled, maybe a little unintentionally, but misled the American people? Was there a lack of candor when you..." Jonathan Karl's like, "Why'd you lie?" It's very different things, right? If you go up to somebody and you say, "Hey, Bob, you said you were going to hand in your TPS report yesterday, and there was no TPS report. You think maybe you misspoke on that one?" That's one thing. If you went up to, "Hey, Bob, you're a TPS report not doing liar," very different, right? It's about respect. It's about decorum. It's about a show of decency. But if you want to be a famous journo or a more famous journo, all you have to do is attack Trump in some way, and everyone thinks that you're such a great guy. But sometimes these days you have, I think, a recognition that Joe Biden can't get this thing done. The more people see him out there, the more they recognize that this guy is just unable to do it. Unable to do it. And that his best plan for America so far is that he's going to take more of your money. Play 13.
What I'm talking about is no one making under $400,000 a year will pay a single increase in taxes. I have a list here of the taxes we're going to change to make sure that everybody pays their fair share. You realize there's 19 of the Fortune 500 companies don't pay a single penny in tax, not one single penny in taxes. That people making in the top 1%, by the time the tax cut, the 10 years runs out, middle class taxes are going to go up even higher. under Trump's tax bill, and the wealthy are going to get even more wealthy. I'm not trying to punish anybody.
No, I get it, but when would you make these changes is my point, because the economy is in a bad state right now. You wouldn't, I mean, would you wait for unemployment to go under 2%?
No. I'd make the changes on the corporate taxes on day one. And the reason I'd make the change in the corporate taxes, it can raise $1.3 trillion if they just start paying at 28% instead of 21%. And what are they doing? They're not hiring more people.
This guy has no idea what he's talking about. Not very smart, never has been very smart, not very successful, other than just in getting elected a senator from Delaware. No offense to any of our beloved Delaware listeners, but it is like, becoming the mayor of Schenectady. It's not that big a deal to be a senator from a state of the size and political importance. Again, beautiful beaches. I like Delaware, but it's a different deal when you're talking about whether we're supposed to be impressed by Joe Biden's political career there. But Trump understands that there's a weakness here. Trump understands that the libs, they're just, the weekend at Bernie's candidacy has some cracks in it. There are some problems. Play 17.
As we continue to follow the science-based approach to protect our people and vanquish the virus, Joe Biden continues to use the pandemic for political gain. Every time I see him, he starts talking about the pandemic. He's reading it off a teleprompter. I'm not allowed to use a teleprompter. Why is that, Phil? They ask questions and he starts reading the teleprompter. He says, move the teleprompter a little bit closer, please. I don't know. I think if I did that, I'd be in big trouble. I think that would be the story of the year.
I think the president's right, and I think he knows Biden's being propped up